the finance. The meeting is now called to order. It is 7:02 p.m. This meeting is being held in person at the district's administrative office and by teleconference. Members of the public can attend and participate in the meeting in person or via Zoom. Instructions for submitting public comments are available on the meeting agenda. May we have roll call, please?
Director Gleason?
Here.
President McNiven?
Here.
Supervisor Simidian?
Here.
Director Kishimoto? Here. And Director Sear?
Here.
Thank you.
There's one item on the Financing Authority meeting agenda. Confirm no activity by the Midpeninsula Regional Open Space District Financing Authority on debt issues for the fiscal year ending June the 30th, 2024.
I'm happy to move approval.
Oh.
Second, yeah. Okay. Director Sear. What, we have to take.
We need a vote. Oh, no, we don't. We
Public
need
comment.
public comment. Do we have public comment?
President McNiven, I do not have any.
Good, thank you. Any deliberation? Nope. So we will have a vote. I guess we're not getting a staff presentation.
Nope, we moved past it. Well,
Our newbie jumped the gun here.
No worries.
It's not a.
Stefan Janschlag, CFO. The staff presentation would be excruciatingly short because there is absolutely no activity in the Finance Authority for the last couple of years. And we are researching to see if we need to keep it open or if we can close it or what our recommendation will be, but not today.
Thank
Okay.
you. All
we
right,
have a motion and second.
motion and second, we'll take a vote.
Director Gleason?
Yes.
President McNiven?
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian?
Yes.
Director Kishimoto?
Yes.
Director Sear?
Yeah.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. This meeting of the Financing Authority is now adjourned.
For this meeting.
Stay there.
Yes, ma'am. You say so. I'll stay.
Need to have you more involved. We've never been this efficient before.
No, I remember when we talked about the fact that there was going to be no activity and there wasn't going to be much to talk about, so.
I don't know where she's going to sit.
I was just going to say, would you like me to do it?
Yeah, I think she asked.
Happy to sit in the front row if you like.
Would you like to do that?
But it's fine. Whatever you
Okay.
need. Whatever
Thank you
need.
so
No, no.
much. Karen, Director.
Why-
Good evening, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Midpeninsula Regional Open Space District. I am Margaret McNiven, President of the Board of Directors. The meeting is now called to order. May we have roll call, please?
Director Gleason?
Here.
Director Christine Tucker? Here. Director Whipple?
Here.
President McNiven?
Here.
Director Holman?
Yes.
Director Kishimoto?
Yes.
Director Sear?
Yes.
Thank you all present.
Okay, the board met in closed session at 5:30 p.m. this evening, and there is nothing to report out. Oral communications. Are there any comments from members of the public on matters within the jurisdiction of the district but not on the agenda tonight?
President McNiven, I do not have any.
You? So our next item is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Director Gleason,
Yes.
Director Christine Tucker,
Yes.
Director Whipple,
Yes.
President McNiven,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto,
Yes.
and Director Seer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
All right. Our first order is very special, a special order of the day. It's a proclamation honoring Supervisor Joseph Midian. Thank you for everything you've done. We have a proclamation for you, and you have bigger fans than me. So Director Holman has asked if she could read the proclamation for you.
This is actually a gatefold. There are 3 pages of this. So this is proclamation of the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District honoring Supervisor Joe Midian. And there you go. Whereas the Honorable Joe Midian has served the public as a legislator with distinction since 1983, with an unparalleled career spanning local, regional, and state offices, including the Palo Alto Unified School District, Palo Alto City Council, California State Assembly, California State Senate, and most recently a second term with the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. Currently representing the northern and western regions of District 5 in Santa Clara County, Supervisor Midian has consistently championed the needs of his constituents with unwavering leadership on issues affecting environmental protection, public health, education, and civil engagement. And whereas Supervisor Midian has consistently supported the values and mission of the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District by advancing mutual goals, by preserving the open spaces that provide sanctuary for wildlife, opportunities for recreation, and invaluable contributions to the health of the environment and the physical and mental well-being of the community. And for several years, Joe Midian has served as a valued member of Mid-Pen's Finance Authority, just held, whose purpose is to provide financing assistance to fund the acquisition and preservation of open space land and to finance public capital improvements. And throughout the legislative career, Joe Midian has worked in a bipartisan manner, actively reaching consensus across the aisle to create real solutions for Californians, as is evident in his prolific record of getting impactful bills signed into law, including Senate Bill SB, in other words, 729, that improve the efficiency and effectiveness of state and regional water quality control boards in protecting water quality and the integrity of clean water sources. And whereas in 2002, then Assembly member Midian authored AB 953 to support Mid-Pen's open space preservation goals by providing added flexibility in the exchange of easements as a land conservation tool, and by reducing administrative burdens and costs associated with small-scale contracts. And in 2002 also, Supervisor Midian supported the allocation of Stanford Recreation Mitigation Funds for the Alpine Regional Trail Improvement Project to convert a closed 2.3-mile portion of Alpine Road into a multi-use trail for hiking, mountain biking, and equestrian use that directly links trail users from the foothills area through Portola Valley to the Skyline Area Regional Trail System. And whereas through his tenacious oversight, perseverance, and grit, and inventive and strategic thinking, Joe Midian solidified protection of the ridgeline above San Antonio County Park and Preserve from any further damage by Lehigh Quarry rallying a diverse coalition of stakeholders behind the Don't Chop the Top movement, with Santa Clara County granting Mid-Pen an enforcement role to protect the scenic ridgeline easement that forms the backdrop of Santa Clara Valley. And whereas his leadership on holding Lehigh Quarry accountable for their impacts to the environment and to public health eventually led to closure of the Lehigh cement plant and the ceasing of Lehigh Quarry mining activities. Whereas Joe Midian's deep connection to the community, his focus on thoughtful policymaking, and his dedication to preserving the environment have left an indelible legacy on Santa Clara County and the entire state of California. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors that the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District does hereby express its individual and collective gratitude and respect for the Honorable Joe Midian for his service to the state of California, Santa Clara County, and wishes upon him success and prosperity in whatever capacity he may find it upon himself to continue to serve his community. That's a Do you want to comment further on the proclamation, or I have some personal comments too? How would you like to, what would you like to do this?
Well, knowing this board, I'm sure they all have something to say, so we'll go down the line.
Okay.
We can start
Just Karen?
with you. We'll start with you.
Okay, well, on a personal note, as I've seen you go around to, and I haven't seen all of them, but seen a number of the entities that you've gone to, everyone offers up a long list of things that you've done for their community. And for, the challenge, the, health considerations, there's this broad array of things. Each individual organization and entity runs the gamut of what you've done for them. And each organization has a long list. And while some of them overlap, there are also unique things that you have done for each community, which just speaks to the breadth of things that you have done in this area for all the times that you have been, all the time that you have been in public service. You've modeled, I made a short list here, could have been a long list. You've modeled humility, diplomacy, humor, perseverance, intelligence, compassion. There ought to be a law that anyone serving in public service should adopt these same principles that you have led with. And some have said, of the comments that I have heard, some have said, it's really too bad Joe's not going to be leading us anymore. And to that I say, you always will be, because you are a beacon and will continue to be. And thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, great. Well, well said, Karen. And so ditto to that, but I'd like to add one other thought. Joe, it's just been, to me, incredibly instructive and inspiring to me to watch you do your job. And I think about Stanford, and I think about Lehigh, and I think about, how's he going to manage this, and how are we going to manage it? But just to watch you work was just incredibly inspiring to me and instructive to me. So I think it's made me a better elected official because of you. So thank you for everything you've done, but also for the example you set for us.
Director Kirsten Tucker.
Well, ditto to my two colleagues. It's hard to add to that, but I will say, for me, there's just a very few public servants that stand head and shoulders above the others. And you are one of them. Your legacy of accomplishments in this region, for the state of California, for this region, for the people. Well, Karen tried to read it all, but there's so much more. Thank you so much. And we really look forward to maybe having some more time to hike with you or relax a little bit and savor some of the beautiful work that you've done. Thank you.
Director Kishimoto.
Thank you. Well, I definitely third all the comments made so far. The comment made about dealing with extremely complex subjects such like Stanford and Lehigh. The way that you worked with the public, you worked with, you flew to Texas, I understand, and so you knew basically, how to apply the levers. It was a masterful demonstration of how to really move a mountain. It was a upside down mountain, anyways. Move a quarry, anyways. And I'll just say, your contributions have been many, but I think one that you mentioned. I guess Karen said beacon, but I mean, I think of a mentor and teacher as well, because you always teach. You always like to teach people, the citizens, how to be an effective advocate, and so that's what it all depend. We all depend on is teaching every one of our citizens to become advocates and citizens, and so I think you can definitely feel confident that you're leaving this a better democracy than you got. So thank you.
That's great. Director Sear.
Director Sear. Joe, I can't say a whole lot more than what my colleagues have already expressed. It's been a real honor to work with you the very brief number of times we've had an opportunity. And I think what I'd like to do to add to all of the laud comments that you've received is I've really appreciated your patience. You're not concerned about having to turn over whatever project you're working on next week or next month or next year. But the persistence really pays off. And some of the ones that have been mentioned are clear examples of that. And there's not too many folks in public service who have patience. You want to get it done or get on to the next thing or what have you. So that's one of the characteristics that I really appreciate. I want to thank you for that.
Director Gleason.
I haven't been in this business very long, so I have much less personal experience than others. But one of the things that's really impressed me is all the elected officials that I know, and my colleagues here and in Los Gatos and elsewhere, have just a tremendous respect and admiration for what you've done. And I think that speaks to one thing is a real willingness and courage to stand up for what's right, but also to bring people together while doing it. And I think that's been great. And thank you very much for that. And best wishes for hopefully some time off, and don't be a stranger. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say, Director Holman wants to add some more words, but my words are, like Director Gleason, I've only been in this business a couple of years, and I want to be an elected official like you when I grow up. I've watched you in doing your job, and it's very impressive. So thank you.
The only thing I wanted to add is something I forgot to say earlier, which is you haven't heard the last of us. We'll be in touch.
All right. Would you like, Anna, would you like to say a few words?
So Supervisor Simitian, thank you so much for your amazing support for Midpen. And I have to say, I have never seen anyone quite so masterfully put together coalitions. For example, with the Lehigh issue, you brought Teamsters, environmental advocates, public agencies, cities, all coming together, rallying over a common shared goal. And that takes a lot of wit, wisdom, foresight, and strategy that is just, I've learned a lot watching you and seeing how you have been so successful in many of these endeavors, and something that we have and the community at large have benefited so greatly. So thank you for bringing that type of strategic leadership to our region and to the state.
Did you want to say something more? Or no, you're all set. Thank you. How about you? Would you like to say some words, Joe?
Pass the resolution proclamation.
I don't remember doing it before, but as I said, I'm new in this business, so happy to do it if you want.
I'd move approval of the proclamation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just didn't want to approach the podium to be an advocate for the proclamation. That seemed a little gauche.
Well, we haven't voted yet, so be careful.
I would just say, first and foremost, thank you for the kind words, but at the risk of stating the obvious, whatever kudos you send my way are clearly not associated with my long service as a member of the Financing Authority, which which, as we saw tonight, is not the heaviest lift in public service. At least it hasn't been in recent years. I do want to say that while there were all those characteristics, some of which might be accurate representations, one word that wasn't used, which I have to own, is prickly, because I can be prickly, and I'm thinking of a conversation I have teased Eureka and Karen about this previously, when I think they just got me on a bad day, and they just kind of let it go by, and we got back to business. And to the points about persistence and patience, and the long track record that this organization has, you don't preserve a planet forever in a day or a week or a month or even a year sometimes. So if there's a shout out for people with patience and persistence, it ought to go towards this board and this organization and the staff that through the years have been absolutely determined to sooner or later eventually pull it together and preserve it in perpetuity. That's an extraordinary legacy, and I hope you all are proud of that and don't take your roles for granted for a moment. I do want to say, in the category of humility that you all are modeling, and perhaps some don't even realize it, the notion of shared enforcement for the easements that protect the top of the hillside began with this organization. So, thank you for the pat on the back, but the truth of the matter, which I have tried to share wherever I can, and which I definitely want to share tonight, is, the proposal came from Midpen, not the other way around. And Midpen said very politely, very graciously, wouldn't you like to have Midpen have responsibility for enforcing that easement that protects the hillsides? And unsaid, unspoken, very tactfully, and in a way that I thought was very politically adroit, no one said, because we're probably going to be a more reliable protector of that hillside than a 5-member board of supervisors, where members come and go, and where only one of the 5 actually represents the affected property. So, little back and forth, little give and take. Ultimately, the solution was to share the enforcement of the easement, what I call a belt and suspenders approach, the best of both worlds, if you will. I'm sure I could trot out some more cliches if I had another minute or two, but it really was, I think, an inspired move to say, why don't we make sure that we have not just one agency, but 2 agencies? And for those who wonder what on earth we're talking about here, or what I'm talking about, what happened as a result of that action by our board of supervisors, without anybody ever having to, send a threatening letter or step into a courtroom, was that the message was sent very clearly: no, we're not going to chop the top. Now, chop the top, I have to take credit or blame for, depending. My whole office groaned when I said, why don't we just say don't chop the top? And everybody thought that that was an inartful use of language. And my view was it was something everybody could understand and that everybody could support. Didn't have to be fancy, didn't have to be flowery, just like don't chop the top. But the message that that joint protection by both agencies, both organizations sent was, no, we're not going to go there. And that was really the catalyst, the very first step that made all of the rest of the work possible. So as an elected official, I can't say I resist getting credit. That would be disingenuous, but I hope in the days ahead you will sort of give yourself some attaboys and attagirls for being really the sort of catalytic agent that made this protection possible. And that, again, will, I think, ultimately protect these hillsides forever and ever and ever by virtue of your good work. So forgive the little mini history lesson here. I couldn't quite resist. Thank you for the kind words. And You know, the last thing I want to say by way of teasing you all before there's a vote, Madam Chair, and I don't want to foul this up for myself, but I have always gotten the biggest of kicks out of the fact that there are 7 wards, because I, of course, think of you all as ward politicians as a result of that, ward bosses for the Midpeninsula Regional Open Space District. And I just think that that is the funniest characterization of the way in which this organization does its work. Thank you for your friendship, thank you for your partnership, and thank you for including me in tonight's agenda. It's really exceptionally kind of you, and it means the world to me. Take care.
I think the wardens should vote now, us wardens. Yeah.
Sorry to confirm, it was moved by Director Holman and second by Kishimoto. Okay, thank you. Director Gleason,
Yes.
Director Christine Tucker,
Yes.
Director Ripple,
Yes.
President McNiven,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto,
Yes.
and Director Seer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
Can we keep you for just a second longer? Thank you. Well, not only pictures, but we have some swearing in to do. Yes. So our next special order of the day is to administer the oath of office to re-elected directors for wards 3, 4, and 7. And you get the honor of having Supervisor Simidian administer that oath.
Yeah, so if I can please
Yeah,
have
I'll do
Director Christine Tucker, Ripple, and Seer by the podium, and Supervisor Simidian.
All right, directors, please raise your right hand and please repeat after me. I, state your name.
I, Jed Seer,
It's a good start. No one said state your name. That happens sometimes. Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without mental reservation
without mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations. By the authority vested in me under the Constitution of the State of California and the County Charter of Santa Clara County, I am now able to declare you duly sworn. Please take your seats. Commence your duties.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We have some signing to do.
Miss you, for sure. Okay, good.
Yes. Do I need to sign or are we good? Raise out the door and let this go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Madam Chair and members, and thank you
Sure.
to the returning members for your continued service. Take
Who,
care.
who would you like to have your picture taken with? All of us?
I think the answer to that question is yes, Madam Chair.
Ward did you live in? Oh, what's it? Whose ward did you live in? What, yeah.
All right. Yay. Let's continue with the meeting with the consent calendar agenda items 1 through 10. Does any member of the board wish to have any item pulled from the consent calendar?
I don't want to pull anything, but I would like to comment on one item.
Okay, we can do that now.
Great. So I'm particularly interested in item 8, the consideration of a constituents bench.
You have your mic on.
Oh, yeah, sorry. In honor of Struther and Tommy Smith at Fremont Older Open Space Preserve. So I just want to say I'm very, very supportive of this and excited that we're going to be doing this for Struther and for Tommy. I just very briefly, I got a chance to know Struther for during his infamous mountain bike tour of, it's called Water Wheel Trail. And this was right after I came on to the board, and Struther kind of introduced me to mountain biking and to docents and to the preserves all at once. And it was actually quite fun and quite inspiring. And I think the 3 letters that we received from Renee and from Chris and Dave really captured what Struther and Tommy really brought to their 20 years of service as our docents. And just the words dedication, passion, kindness, welcoming, sharing, engaging, informing, educating, and inspiring. I think those really describe what these 2 brought to the program and brought to us and brought to our constituents. So very supportive of the bench, and I'd also ask that tonight's meeting be adjourned in their honor. Thank you.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
President McNiven, I do have one oral comment on consent item number 8. Yes.
Let's do it.
And Mr. Mike Fonsick, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hello, yes, thank you. I'm here to comment specifically on the proposal for Struther and Tommy Smith and the memorial bench in Fremont Older. Having participated in many hikes and bike rides with both Struther and Tommy, I'm strongly supportive of it. I wanted to bring up a possible additional proposal in that same vein. One of Struther's favorite bike trips that he led as a docent was from the Russian Ridge parking lot down onto Mindigo Road and to the base of Mindigo Hill, which we then, at least in the latter years, were able to proceed by foot to the top of Mindigo Hill. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, Mindigo Road was closed to bicyclists, and understandably so. I must say Struther was very disappointed by that fact because it was one of his rides. I would propose the creation of a memorial ride for Struther, where such a ride would be permitted under special permit as a special event to be led by docents, under supervision with small groups. This seems a reasonable proposal. There are vehicles traveling that same road, both district and other, and there have been previous, I know, volunteer recognition events held on Indigo Ranch. So again, I would propose that in addition to the bench, sometime in the future, there be consideration for a special permit, special event to reconvene the former bike route that Strother had led for a number of us down from Russian Ridge along Mindigo Road into the base of Mindigo Hill. And I thank you for considering that.
Thank you. I believe we do have a process for that, right? Special events.
You know, we could probably
Do it offline.
return
it
back
yeah.
with a response.
Yeah. Did you hear that? It's gone. Okay, we'll do that. All right. We do need a vote.
Thank you, Director Gleason,
Yes.
Director Christine Tucker,
Yes.
Director Spreffel,
Yes.
President McNiven,
Yes.
Director Holman,
Yes.
Director Kishimoto,
Yes.
and Director Seer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
Right. Item 11 is the shuttle and parking management concepts for Purisima Creek Redwoods Open Space Preserve.
All right, good evening, Board of Directors. My name is Tyler Smith, Planner 3. We are here today for Prisma Multimodal Access Implementation Project. I'm joined today by Gretchen Lausson, Senior Planner, as well as folks from our consultant team, Parametrics, Pete Rusidi, Jen Schreiber, Sam Erickson, and Pete and Sam are joining us virtually, and I do have Jen here with us in person today. The general manager's recommendation is to accept the recommended shuttle and parking management concept options for Purisima Creek Redwoods Open Space Preserve, with any final modifications as directed by the Board of Directors as the project description to initiate environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act as part of the Purisima Comprehensive Use and Management Plan. Final approval of a shuttle option occurs at a later time. The agenda for today, we have about a 20-minute or so presentation. It's going to be broken up into two main parts. First, the project background and shuttle program, and we'll break for board questions after that time. And then we'll get into the parking management concepts presentation, and then again, break for board questions. So those two periods for board questions, I would just put in a request that we just use that time for questions so that there's plenty of time for board discussion later on. And then we'll get into next steps before public comment and then board discussion. So getting into the background, the Purisima Creek Redwoods Multimodal Access Study completed in 2022. It was pursued to better manage visitation, improve the visitor experience, and increase greener modes of travel. And it recommended a series of transportation demand management strategies to implement, including high priority as well as secondary TDM strategies. Shown on this screen are examples of those strategies. Those high priority strategies that are bold and underlined, those are the strategies which have design impacts for the North Ridge and future Verde Road parking areas, those design projects. And we've worked with Parametrics to evaluate those strategies further. In terms of prior engagement that we've conducted between 2021 and 2022, Midpen staff working on the Purisima Multimodal Access Study, the Purisima to the Sea feasibility study, and Highway 35 feasibility study conducted over 50 engagement activities. And I realize the text is really small, but it's just to convey that a lot of engagement went into these projects, which help to inform project recommendations, including informing parking area designs and also which TDM strategies to prioritize for implementation. And in terms of our presentation before the P&R committee in September 10th, there was a lot of great discussion and a lot of comments. And so here's just a high level list of that feedback. The detailed list is included in attachment 2, which provides how the project team has responded to those comments that required follow-up. And so the feedback included on the technical aspects of the proposed TDM programs, a request for additional neighbor outreach, express preference for a shuttle service that is free for the public to use, that is successful from initial implementation, and provides a level of service that adequately satisfies the visitor experience and includes a corresponding marketing budget for public education and instruction. And the committee also requested additional information on performance measures for the shuttle program and thresholds, other thresholds to implement the parking management programs. So with that, we're going to get into the shuttle program, and I'm now going to pass it along to Pete.
Thanks, Tyler. And thanks everybody for being here tonight. I hope you can hear me okay. Tyler, can you give a thumbs up if you can hear me? Yes, all right, thank you. Thanks everybody, and I'm sorry that I could not be there in person tonight. I was there in person for the P&R meeting, and like Tyler said, we had a really good discussion, and they provided a lot of really good guidance. So what we're going to show you tonight is similar to what we presented to them, but this tries to incorporate some of their guidance as well. What you see on the map there is what we're calling Concept 1. I wanted to just give a little bit of background about this. When we were looking at the ideas for a shuttle program, we looked at a lot of different options, a lot of different permutations, including a very focused concept like the one that you see here, which we'll talk about more, but also a variety of kind of wider ranging options of places to serve. There's a classic trade-off in transit planning between speed and coverage, meaning kind of the more places you serve, which is a good thing because you can get more riders and make more connections, the more you slow down the service. And then that, of course, makes the service less attractive to the riders who ride it and less useful to potential new riders. So there's this kind of tension that you're always trying to balance. So when looking at all these options, we kind of kept coming back to the overall goals of the shuttle program, which, as we understand from working with the district and from our scope of work, was really, and also building on the transportation demand management study that our team also did leading up to this. The main goals were to alleviate the parking and congestion issues along Purissima Creek Road, to provide a good experience for the visitors and the users, like Tyler mentioned from the P&R input, and to operate the program in a way that's fiscally sustainable, so that it is able to operate relatively efficiently. So given the high cost to provide a shuttle, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, our first major finding of the study was that really to most directly meet those goals, what we're calling Concept 1, kind of a very focused, efficient service aimed at solving the very direct issue that we were asked to solve, really is kind of the most efficient way to deliver this. And as you can see on the map, there's just 2 stops. This is meant to be a very focused service. You would couple it with a parking prohibition or parking limitations at the Purissima Creek Road area, and Tyler's going to go over that in a minute. And so to replace that, you would run a very a high frequency, convenient, efficient shuttle from one point to the other. And it would go from the trailhead at the lot there to the new Verdi lot, which is labeled on here as the Purissima to the C parking area, which I think we all call the Verdi lot. So again, this Concept 1 is really based on that first finding, based on the goals that to most directly and efficiently address the goals to allow the district to control costs, but also to provide the highest quality service possible. This type of two-stop, very focused direct service is probably the best option. Again, we did look at options to serve more places. We looked into Half Moon Bay and Pescadero, and in the report, there's a map of all those different places that we looked at, and we noted that there are some pretty good options for places that the shuttle could also serve, but that would increase the cost so much and spread the service so thinly that really for something like that to work, it probably would need to be paired with some sort of a partnership, some sort of a funding partnership. And again, to kind of get back to the core goals here to solve that parking issue and that roadway issue, providing a very quick direct shuttle seemed like the most logical recommendation. So that's the concept that we're going to focus on here for the rest of the presentation. So I just wanted to kind of give that background for this. As you can see in the box on the slide, this route is approximately 4.5 miles one way or 9 miles round trip. That does require vehicle turnaround at both stops. And so at the Purisima to the Sea parking area, the Verity lot, that's not going to be an issue at all because that's being built into the new lot. For the Purisima Creek Road lot, we did some kind of planning level measurements with some help from staff out in the field. And because there's a wide variety of vehicles that you can use for the shuttle, we believe that it shouldn't be an issue for a shuttle vehicle to turn around. But that is something that will need to be looked at a little more closely as the district moves into working with a shuttle vendor to actually procure the correct vehicles. That's something that we would look at more closely to make sure that the vehicle specifications are able to do that. But assuming vehicles can turn around at both ends, this is a very direct way to connect those two stops. And if you go to the next slide, please. This slide, again, it's the same map, but it kind of summarizes what the main goals are for the program and how we would really measure success. So again, if we are able to establish a shuttle program model that is sustainable, if we are able to eliminate the parking issues along Purisima Creek Road, and if the shuttle can be high quality enough with low waiting time so that it's very easy for people to use, low cost, low barriers to access. So that's a kind of an overall summary of shuttle concept one. The next few slides get into some of the technical details, and we'll try to cover them at a high level. And of course, we can cover any of the further details in the board question section. So for the proposed service itself, we looked at a couple different options. First, we looked at the visitor demand, really to understand what those visitor patterns were. And we got some good input from the P&R committee. We went back and looked at some more of the hourly data to really kind of understand the flows. The first service scenario that you can see listed there was really trying to meet the bare minimum visitor demand. So it was a lower level of service really meant to respond to those visitor patterns to kind of meet the bare minimum. But then we also wanted to look at kind of a higher level of service mainly to reduce the wait times of that service. If you run more frequent service, kind of the two polls that we were looking at is generally every 30 minutes or every 15 minutes. The expected wait time, if you can really cut that down to, if you're running service every 15 minutes or so, then the expected wait time would be about half that, right? So for the average person who showed up in the middle of that 15-minute period, they wouldn't need to wait any more than that time. That's how you really can provide a better visitor experience. And so what you see in that table is really looking at scenario 2, trying to emphasize the visitor experience. We worked with the district to understand the park hours, and we looked at the sunrise and sunset. Certainly the finer points of some of these hours, I think you could continue to hone, but the basic idea that we wanted to show here was providing weekend service during the winter. So that's on Saturdays and Sundays, and providing that every 30 minutes. But then as we ramp up to the spring and the fall, and then really to the summer, it's the same type of service pattern, but the hours are extended for the summer period due to the longer daylight. We have every 30 minutes at the very kind of tail ends at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, but in the middle, we would add a second bus that would be able to provide an overlay, so to provide every 15-minute service during the peak parts of the middle of the day in the spring and fall and in the summer. So that was scenario number 2. We also looked at a third scenario of just providing weekend only service. And I think, Tyler, you can talk about that a little more if we get into that later. But again, the overall goal here is just to kind of show how we would overlay service and to provide coverage that meets the visitor demand and also provides a short enough wait time during the peak periods to be a high quality service for the user. So hopefully that made sense. And we can go to the next slide, please. And again, we can talk more about that, about the details in the Q&A session. We know we're packing kind of a lot of content into these slides, so thank you for bearing with us. We also looked at multiple different ways that you could deliver the service. The first one on there is a private operator. This is generally the easiest to do from a administrative standpoint. It does carry a high cost. It's got kind of a high sticker price, but all of the administrative costs and risks and all those things are wrapped up into that into that cost that the vendor charges you. So the private operator assumes a lot of those risks, and that's priced into it. So that we felt really was kind of the best near-term option for the district due to the efficiency and the fact that the operator takes on, some of the risk, some of the fiscal risk of vehicles and things like that, and also offers a lot of flexibility to the district because you can sign, say a 3-year contract to operate it and see how it goes and tweak it, as opposed to something like the second option that you see there is direct operation in-house by the district staff using either leased or purchased vehicles. When you just look at the kind of the raw cost of drivers and vehicles and fuel, it could appear to be less expensive, but what we've really found is that the long run costs really do add up in terms of the staffing that it takes to do it, the vehicle storage, the vehicle maintenance, liability, and things like that. And that also adds kind of risk to the agency if there's any sort of cost overruns in the cost of labor, things like that. That puts the risk on the district instead of the contract operator. And finally, it really kind of requires the district to develop institutional expertise as a transit provider. And so, again, that's kind of a separate skill set that the district would have to develop and then hone. It's certainly something that the district could do, but again, it kind of gets away from maybe some of the core things that the district most likely would like to do. The third option that we looked at, and we had a couple of really productive meetings with Samtrans, was to evaluate a partnership with Samtrans for either expanding their fixed route service, expanding their on-demand service, the Ride Plus it's called, or running kind of a more traditional shuttle, but having Samtrans be the contracted operator. And in the longer term, we felt like this actually could be very viable. And the staff members that we spoke to thought that in theory that this sounded good. There's a lot of kind of longer term coordination that would need to happen between the two agencies. So we felt like this was kind of a longer lead time. And maybe this is something that the district could work with Samtrans on over time. But it seemed like there was a lot of administrative hurdles to making that happen. So if the district wants to get this off the ground sooner, doing a shorter term contract with a private operator is really what we recommend. And that's what a lot of our cost estimates and things focus on. Okay, thank you for getting through that slide with us. I know that was a lot. On the next slide, we just talk a little bit about the staffing and the vehicles. The typical roles you would have for a shuttle program would be a GM, admin support, drivers, and dispatchers. There'd usually be one dispatcher, 1 to 2 drivers on duty at any given time. The contracted operator would staff this, but the district also would have kind of some of their own staff time to manage the contract and some of the details there. Those photos on the slide show typical shuttle vehicles that are being used in the region. I think you probably recognize a few of those, including Ride Plus at the bottom. Those all carry kind of between 15 to 25 passengers, again, depending on how much space we determine that we have and the vehicle costs at the time that we're ready to procure. You can work with the contracted operator to have some vehicle specs, and most likely either if they're a large enough operator, they may have some of those in their fleet. Otherwise, they can go ahead and lease those for that term. They can get pretty good lease rates, and they would pass that cost on through the contract. I guess finally, just one quick note on zero emission vehicles. That market is still it's still very much developing, and it's kind of starting in the larger vehicle, the transit bus and truck market. Right now, the shuttle vehicle market just really isn't there, but we're really hoping that it's going to be soon. The market's going to continue to grow. There's a lot of mandates, especially at the state level, to convert fleets. And so we're really hoping that it will be there soon. But so far, in terms of commercial viability, there really isn't a vehicle class that would match the size requirements and the cost requirements that you would need that is possible for zero emission now. But that's something that we want to monitor. And again, that's something that a contracted operator would be able to kind of provide, because they would be most likely under the mandates to move to zero emission with the market. And so again, that would be something that you could work out with that operator when that becomes available. Okay, next slide. This slide really kind of zooms in a little bit more about kind of the types of considerations you would have for a recreational shuttle that serves open space areas. And so not only did we look at the kind of traditional shuttle programs in the area, but we went a little bit outside the area to look at some of the shuttles that serve recreational areas like this. And so we looked a lot at like the vehicle branding and things like that. Here's a couple photos from California and the Pacific Northwest of some of the vehicle branding, and just kind of noting that, you know, this is something that you could, it doesn't necessarily have to look like a boring airport shuttle. You know, it could be something that really matches the district branding and really kind of matches the vibe and the feel of the preserve. And now I think I'm going to pass to Tyler. He's going to talk for just a couple slides about the parking prohibition and some of the cost details.
Thank you, Pete. The 2022 study recommends restricting roadside parking and closing the Prisma Creek Road parking area while the shuttle program operates. And these parking restrictions, they're key to the program's success to accommodate shuttle turnaround and incentivize use of the shuttle program. Visitors would park at the future Verde Road parking area and take the shuttle to the Prisma Creek trailhead, resolving the current traffic and congestion issues near the trailhead. On the left is an example of the current parking restrictions, where there's 350 linear feet of roadside parking accommodating 20 vehicles. And then you have the roadside parking area, which accommodates 7 vehicles. And on the right is an example of the potential parking restrictions. And installing a hardwired automatic gate at the Prisma Creek Road parking area would be the most effective way to restrict general vehicle access to the parking area. And remote access could be granted to shuttle drivers. The district would need to coordinate with the county to permit the gate and update any parking regulations to expand the area of restricted roadside parking along Prisma Creek Road. This next table, or this first table actually, summarizes the cost across 6 years. It's a summary table, distilled down to 3 years of capital improvements and 3-year shuttle pilot. So planning and implementation of capital improvements occur in the first 3 years and shuttle operation in the last 3. And then looking at the operating costs, the operating costs consist of any district staff time that's required in support of capital improvements or shuttle program management, as well as ongoing shuttle operations and any marketing budget that's associated with the shuttle program. And so year 3, as the district is getting prepared to launch the shuttle service, there are some shuttle startup costs that are required, and that also involves district staff time. In year 4, years 4 through 6, the total cost column that you see, that reflects actually the overall annual operating cost for the shuttle program. So all in, it's 3.4 to 5.4 million to implement this shuttle program with the associated capital improvements. And so these next couple slides now are going to just dive into the details of all these cost elements. So in terms of the capital costs, they include the following cost elements: design, technical studies, and permitting in the first 2 years, and any material costs in the 3rd year. And we've assumed a 15% contingency for these numbers. And in total, capital costs come in around 280 to 415,000. District staffing costs. So the costs displayed here in this table, they assume the highest step of a position's combined salary and benefits and the position's full-time equivalent. And so years 1 and 2, there would be a capital project going on, which would be led by a capital project manager 3, around 200 hours per year. Year 3, planning gets involved with signage. And at that point, the district prepares to launch a shuttle program. And so there, like I mentioned before, there's shuttle startup activities requiring the time of district staff. So a management analyst would serve as a program manager, and an admin assistant would be there for support. And in that year, planning affairs gets involved to really help get the word out for the program. In year 4, those same staff working on the program are still involved, and there's an addition of a ranger aide to be present on site at the Prisma Creek Road parking area to assist visitors of the shuttle and communicate and troubleshoot with shuttle service staff. Years 5 and 6, we're down to the administrative staff providing program support. So all in, district staff costs associated with supporting the shuttle program and getting prepared for the program are $296,000 to $673,000. And I am going to give this back to Pete, who will get into the marketing costs.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. One of the things that Tyler mentioned, really good feedback we got from the P&R committee, excuse me, is to ensure that there's a really strong marketing campaign to ensure that the program succeeds, to educate folks about the shuttle and how to use it, and the fact that it's changed to what they might be used to now, but that it's relatively easy to use. So we understand that that's something that we really want to emphasize to make this a smooth adoption. On this slide, you see kind of what we call like a sample marketing budget. Is to generally be paid to a communications consultant. I mean, these are certainly things that the district could do in-house, but they would need to allot the staff time to do it. So these are kind of generally what a consultant would charge for this. As you can see listed, there's a lot of ways. We want to meet people where they are. There's a lot of ways to reach folks, including digital ads, print ads, and signage, and merchandise, swag, all that stuff. So kind of a standard package there, but really, excuse me, part of the idea is that we really kind of want to do a full court press on this early. So in kind of the year leading up to the shuttle opening, like Tyler showed in the costs, and for the whole first year, we want kind of the full budget there. So a lot of outreach, a lot of communication to make sure that we can touch everybody that we can, especially people who kind of are used to visiting the preserve now, who are used to doing it a different way, to make sure that that's very smooth. And then, obviously this is something the district would want to monitor, but what we are hoping is that kind of after the year prior, and then the first year, that hopefully the district can kind of slowly ease that back a little bit and never really get rid of the marketing budget. But what we assumed for cost was that in, after the first 2 years, then I should clarify, the year before it opens, and then the first year that it's open, so that 2-year period, do the full budget that you see here, and then hopefully be able to dial that back a little bit. In the second year, dial back to say 75% of that budget. And in the third year, if things are going well, 50%. But again, that's something that we want to monitor as the program went on and get a lot of feedback from the users and kind of try to understand how smoothly that is going. So I think that's it for this slide. If we can go to the final cost slide, dealing with the operating costs. And here, this just kind of breaks down. It's a little more technical, but you can see how it's really based on the service hours that the buses are in service. And you can see here where we have the second bus running at those peak times. You can see, like for instance, in the bottom 2 rows in the summer, you've got one bus is running for 14 hours, so all day from sunrise to sunset, essentially. And then you have that second bus that overlays that for the middle part of the day when we know it's busy. Each bus is able to provide 30-minute service. So essentially one trip out and back would take it 30 minutes when you add in the time to turn around and the time for breaks and extra loading and things like that. So the one bus provides the base 30-minute service. A second bus overlapping that would get us down to 15-minute service. The cost, like you saw on all these slides, is based on a range. So we tried to estimate kind of a high and low range. For the cost of a private operator, you can see the ranges there in the final 2 columns is either from between $150 an hour to $200 an hour. And again, that's kind of soup to nuts, as they say, in terms of the staffing and all those things that are rolled up into the cost of operating the shuttle. So you can see that range there. And the next slide, please. Just really briefly, kind of getting into some of the ways that we would try to measure success. We covered kind of the three broad success factors at the beginning, but looking into maybe some of the measures, themselves, we want to look at things like the total cost to ensure that the program meets the cost that we were hoping it would, and that it is sustainable over the long term. And then we want to have a lot of measures that really kind of base it on the quality of that service. So is the service on time? Do we see a good amount of ridership? What's the cost per rider that the district is paying, which again is kind of, that's really a measure of how efficient is the service. So the more riders you get, the better the cost per rider is. But again, you want to balance that with the quality of the service. So sometimes you may want to provide, again, that really good 15-minute service, even if sometimes, there's not so much riders. So the overall cost per rider may not be as low as you want it to be, but that's a reflection of a higher quality service. And then finally, we want to make sure that we get a lot of feedback, and that is from the experience of the visitors and people who ride the shuttle, but also people who are the neighbors, the people who live along the road, people who might ride the shuttle, things like that. So we want to make sure that we're doing surveys and understand if people are satisfied and what we or the contractor can do to make the service better. And I think there's just a couple more slides for Tyler here.
All right, thank you, Pete. So staff did conduct 2 neighbor engagement activities in November, one in-person one on November 14th and one virtual one on November 19th. We did send postcards out to those that live along the proposed shuttle route and in the vicinity of that route. And listed here are some key themes that emerged from those meetings. So there's general support for the shuttle program, whether that was for service at 7 days a week or weekend only service. There was support for parking restrictions along Prisma Creek Road. We even received some suggestions for additional restrictions for Verde Road. And kind of across the board, we heard from folks that there needs to be improved cell coverage in the area, which could aid with mobile device communications for fixed route shuttle service and improve the visitor experience. So with that, pausing here for the first component of board questions. So if any board members have any questions, we're here.
Director Kishimoto.
Thank you. Thank you and PNR and our consultants for a very, very comprehensive report brought to us. Obviously, a lot of thought has gone into it. So one question is, so for example, the winter schedule, so that if it runs on, the proposal is to run only on the weekends, is that right?
That's correct.
So what happens on the weekdays? I mean, like it would be limited to parking, the 27 parking spaces at the trailhead?
That's correct. So like say we were to do a scenario like that where there's weekend only service during the winter, but then you've got 7 days a week during all other times of the year, then we would have to clearly sign that. So it's clear that the public understands that, and also communicate that through different channels like social media and whatnot. So yes, correct. That roadside parking and parking area would be available for folks to use in the winter during the weekdays.
I should know the answer to this. So right now it's limited to, so I mean, if it's over 27, then they just need to go away. There's no other place to park.
It's kind of like the current condition. Yeah, there's no place to park, and folks may, I guess, hang out to see if someone's, about to leave, or go somewhere else.
Or go somewhere
I think
else.
that's what happens right now. You can't find a spot in the allowed parking spaces.
Okay, and how would you say the feasibility is for example, some members of the public have asked for, well, can't you let us park there for an hour in the morning and then, bring the shuttles in? I mean, is that very feasible to count on somebody leaving the parking lot promptly by 8 a.m.? Is that possible or considered?
I don't know that we've considered that, but I think, and I'll get started, but Pete, please chime in. I think there could be a challenge like in the parking area itself, if there are vehicles there.
They would have
Actually,
to be towed.
I'm just gonna go to this next slide so you can just see the parking area. But it's pretty tight, and the vehicles that we are looking at, it is possible to do a turnaround, but there needs to be unobstructed space for those vehicles to do the turnaround. So vehicles would absolutely have to be out of there.
So you'd have to have a means of towing the cars out, or and really doing an enforcement like that.
I mean, that's not ideal, but that's ultimately would have to happen. But then that would disrupt shuttle operations.
Right.
So that's
right.
why the
But it's not really under consideration.
it's not under consideration
Okay.
now.
Okay. Let me see. Oh, and I guess one question is also, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to talk about the scope of what's going to be analyzed under the EIR. Is that right?
Yes. So yes, the board is going to consider whether to include any of these TDM programs within, yes, the scope of the CEQA review.
Yes, and so do we need to decide between, for example, the private versus Samtrans option, or that's pretty much the same under the
Yeah, so the CEQA process is just going to evaluate the
physical.
Yeah, whether or not we're the fact that we're considering these different TDM strategies. So the type of service isn't necessarily, we don't have to decide on that right now.
Okay, so that's not, we don't vote on that tonight. And what about Verde Road? Restricting parking on that, is that part of staff recommendation, or that wouldn't make a difference from a CEQA point of view?
Gretchen's coming up here, so I think she'd like to talk. So I'll let her.
Okay.
Thank you. Gretchen Lauston, Senior Planner. As part of the proposed recommendations with the new Verde lot, signing that road as well, working with the county for no parking is an element of that project as well. It is a relatively narrow road. And in addition, we don't want to allow a problem to become larger over time. It's better to address it right from the beginning to not allow parking on that road.
Okay, so what I hear is that is going to be, that it's part of the project proposal. Okay. Good. I might have some other questions, but let me turn it back to the chair.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Director Riffle.
Thank you. Thanks, and I agree with Director Kishimoto. It was nicely done to our consultants and staff, and to our committee. And I would like to invite any member of the committee also to comment. I did have a chance to read your minutes and everything, and thank you, by the way, for including the comments from the committee and comments from the neighbors. It was really interesting to read through that, but I always learn a lot from when I listen to the committee. So at some point, I'd love to hear your comments. Just a couple questions. I know that for Rancho San Antonio, I think we surveyed some of the open space preserve users. And I forget, did we ever survey any of the Parisima Creek users about the shuttle concept?
Yeah, during the multimodal access study, we had two visitor survey efforts. The first was to characterize potential access issues that visitors faced. And then that second round of public engagement, which had that visitor survey, we paired that also with Prism to the Sea with the survey questions. But there was a question in there about, we asked folks whether or not they would use a shuttle, use a shuttle to access the preserve.
Okay.
I don't know any data points, but I do have folks here if we need to dig into the study.
Okay. I'm assuming that was positive.
Yes. Shuttle was one of the strategies that folks were excited about implementing at the preserve.
Okay. All right, good. My second question is, what did we learn? Because I know it was mentioned in the report. What did we learn from the San Mateo County shuttle that Wonderlic, which did not work.
Mhm.
And then I think there was also reference to the Muir Woods shuttle, which obviously is working.
Mhm.
Yeah. Were there any kind of takeaways from either of those
Mhm.
that we're incorporating into this lesson?
For sure.
To this application?
Yeah. So with San Mateo County, I know they had 2 shuttle programs. So the one to Wonder Lake, which was the like Parks Explorer.
Right.
I think with that one in particular, it was a long route, and then folks would just get dropped off. So it was just a really long ride, and then they just got dropped off. And we heard from them that maybe pairing that with an interpretive element would have made it a little bit more successful.
Okay.
Whereas with the Coastside shuttle, with that one, it trying to go off, trying to remember. But with that one, I think the marketing, I don't know if that was well marketed as it could have been, and then also it was just a general shuttle, and I think there were also limitations about where they could pull in depending on which way they were going. So I think ultimately it was due to the marketing of that program.
Okay.
And then I think they were not eligible for a second round of funding because they weren't hitting their ridership numbers to support the program.
Right. I see. Okay.
Oh, and I'm sorry, if I may, you asked about Muir Woods as well. So with Muir Woods, they had, I think, extensive issues with the parking leading up to the park, and they ultimately restricted roadside parking and then implemented parking reservations with the on-site parking, but at the same time implemented a shuttle service from satellite parking locations that also required reservations to use the service. So it's like $3 to use the shuttle, whereas it's, I think, $9.50 to reserve a parking spot at that location.
Okay. I had the opportunity to go out hiking with some people today, and I brought this topic up, and they brought up a couple interesting points. They said, you know, Kurt, when we go to Rancho, it's amazing what people will pull out of their cars to take to Deer Hollow Farm or whatever, you know, strollers and all kinds of stuff. And what accommodations do we foresee the shuttle allowing? So I assume you can put your bike somewhere on the shuttle, but what's the experience of how that's going to handle? Because I'm sure some of our users are going to have more than just a backpack.
Yeah, great question. Certainly, we anticipate the vehicles, and we'd have to work with the vendor, but ultimately the vehicles would have to accommodate visitor needs, whether it's like they got their backpacks, service animals, strollers, mobility devices like other power mobility devices, bikes. And so sometimes these vehicles have bike racks on them, but then there's also possibility if there's maybe not enough room at that point, you can maybe bring a bike on board, just depending on the configuration of the vehicle.
Right. Okay.
And ultimately, we work that out with the vendor to find a vehicle type that meets our needs. And in the conversations we have had, typically these vendors do have like a range of vehicles on hand that they use depending on what clients they have based on the needs that they have. So,
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That actually brings up my last question. One of the people in this group was relaying an experience they had at Pinnacles, which requires a shuttle. And unfortunately, the shuttle driver never showed up one day. And it's a 5-mile hike, you know, if the shuttle. And so I was just wondering, how do we make sure that the service operation is really up to our level? I know you can't. It's for them to solve that, but boy, that could just be really detrimental to the service if we have something like that happen.
Yeah. So you want to hear more about like driver retention or?
Well, just how do we make sure that this shuttle is going to be reliable so that people have a good experience and not, it didn't show up.
Yeah. I'd like to call upon Pete or Sam.
Yeah. Tyler, excuse me, sorry. I would be happy to kind of start that answer. And I don't know, Sam can probably fill me in on some parts as well. But, you know, that's kind of one of the advantages of using the shuttle operator. a contractor who really specializes in this, and they have the depth of staffing to kind of cover that. And I mean, certainly you can never guarantee 100% of every time, but your best bet is going with, you know, one of those companies that does that as a specialized service, has the backup vehicles, has staffing, and the backup drivers. Obviously, that would be something that would be built into the contract. If there ever were some sort of a snafu, I mean, you know, there would be certainly the shuttle operator would have to compensate the district. I mean, if there was some sort of, I don't know, an emergency or something where something just couldn't happen, I would hope that maybe the district rangers may be able to help out if someone gets, you know, stranded or something like that. But for the most part, that would be something that you'd build right into the shuttle contract, and the shuttle operators have kind of the depth on their staff and in their vehicles to absorb that most of the time. Sam, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add two pieces from experience with this, which is ultimately you get what you pay for. Part of our analysis did show a higher operating cost per service hour that we just kind of wanted to use as bookmarks, recognizing that when I generally see things go poorly for contracts, it is because they have really lowballed, like the vendor came in really lowballing in order to win the contract, but then they end up with a less reliable service. So there's that piece. And then also, I think contracts go much better in general when Midpen working with them as a team, and contracts are written with incentives instead of punitive language. So there are definitely ways to work the contract and work with your vendors to make sure that the experience is reliable and that people, choose your contract first. So that can all be worked out.
Thanks, Sam.
Oh, and
Go ahead.
one more point. Within that first year, or the first several months of the pilot, we are looking to have staff on site at the Prisma Creek Road parking area to provide support. And really those early days of the shuttle program, that's our time to like really learn and iterate if we need to make sure that program is, we make it as successful as possible. So if there are any issues early, they've got to be, we got to catch those and learn how to correct them to make sure the process runs smoothly.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Kirsten Tucker. And Director Gleason.
Thank you, Tyler, and colleagues at Parametrics. Really appreciate the added oomph you put in the presentation this evening based on the PNR's comments. Particularly appreciated the marketing budget. A couple questions for you. The first has to do with, and this is kind of a crazy idea, but it occurred to me as we're thinking about perhaps having a private operator. Would there be any value in looking at the Cabrillo Unified School District to see whether they could provide shuttle? It would keep dollars on the coast, and I don't know whether it's something they could even possibly entertain, but I'm just wondering whether the school district, they run buses, so
Yeah.
whether that might be an option.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer now, but it's just a thought.
Yeah. And I'm happy to respond because
Please.
we, in doing, research on shuttles these past couple of years, between Rancho and here, schools have their buses and they're maybe not used on the weekends, maybe for special events, but they could be underutilized so that we could take advantage of that and through a partnership. And then also it's opportunity for drivers to basically, there could be part-time drivers or full-time drivers. So maybe it's an opportunity for part-time drivers to get more hours. So yes, there's an opportunity through a partnership possibly.
Yeah, it seems like there could be, and perhaps the district could even, meaning Cabrillo Unified School District, might find it useful to invest in a fleet of smaller shuttle type vehicles that they could then use for other purposes. So just an idea.
Thank you.
Would you please put up slide number 22? So I really like the positive spin on this particular slide, but then I'm looking at ridership and daily, and a potential target being that daily and peak hour rider counts aren't exceeding shuttle capacity. And I'm thinking about what's the worst case scenario in how are we handling, if ridership isn't coming up just enough, and how long do we give it before we stop pouring money into this kind of, because I'm thinking about the Coastside Shuttle, which was an epic failure. And I think we're putting a lot more thought and energy. We're mid-penning this in a way that the Cabrillo or the county didn't. But anyway, if you could provide some thoughts about that.
Great. And then I am gonna ask Pete or Sam again, because then maybe they'll provide like maybe a general time frame of when we would know whether it's time to continue or not.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I would be happy to, and I've never heard mid-pen used as a verb. That was
We're mid-penning, yeah, we do.
really funny. Yeah.
Well,
But yeah, in terms of ridership, it's tough to say what makes it successful. Part of this is that, the original goals of this were to reduce some of those impacts that the district is seeing on Pearson McCreek Road and to that parking area. So to the extent that you want to solve those impacts, I mean, you kind of need to run the shuttle whenever there's really high visitation rates, right? So if we get to a point where the visitation rates drop and start to go down, and we like the fact that the shuttle ridership is low means we think overall visitation is low, then perhaps that's something the district would want to look at. But that's kind of why I kind of tried to caution on the cost per rider as a metric, because that's a metric of efficiency, not a metric of quality of service. And so it may be okay to operate at a kind of a high cost per rider if it's the only way to solve a certain issue that is happening, a certain impact that you need to solve, and if the quality of service is high and people are happy with it. So again, excuse me, sorry about that. I think we want to monitor the overall usage, and only if we think that the ridership is so low that the visitor numbers are also so low that there will no longer be parking or traffic impacts, maybe a time when we might want to do that. So I don't know, I guess I kind of want to get back to the district's goals here. And again, if the goal is to eliminate those impacts and close that parking area to eliminate those impacts, then the shuttle kind of is a necessary piece of that. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer.
Yes, I think there maybe isn't a very satisfying answer other than that we stay dynamic, I'm trying to think of the right word. Thank you. Adaptive, yes, that we're doing adaptive management here, that we're being very thoughtful about what we're seeing and how we respond and not letting it go for months or anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sam?
Another thing that we've heard, when folks are launching a pilot program is sometimes you have to iterate, but of course with contracting, there may be limitations to how much you can iterate. But certainly I agree that if we can be as dynamic as possible to adjust to potential demand and the needs.
If I can just add on here, to be very real in the beginning of any service like this, it is often under the ridership initially is often underwhelming, and sometimes pilot projects get cut early because of it. But this is where the marketing budget and also that iteration within the contract is really a good thing. It's a new service, so don't we see this everywhere. It's like we expect that, but sometimes that does make boards really nervous because it looks like it's going to be something that doesn't grow. But you've got a marketing budget, you've got a great resource, so just hang tight, and there is iteration within the contract that can be done. So
okay, thank you. I appreciate that note to be realistic about how long it takes.
It starts, yeah, it does. It's never, yes, maybe you guys will be the exception, but don't panic if you're not.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that? So are we saying then that we're in this for the 5 years? and is that really what your point is? That in order for things like this to be successful, you got to commit to, seeing this through the really lean startup times, because then it'll take off. Because what happens is, after we're into year 2 and gosh, they're still not right. Or, I mean, do we unplug then, or do you say that no, we let this thing go for 5 years? Or
I don't think you have to go for 5. No, I think you will get better bids if you say 3 years, but you could also do 2 years with options for extensions.
Right.
But because there's higher risk for the vendors procuring a lot of capital and hiring staff,
Right.
getting procedures in place. So for a system that already operates, an ideal pilot would be 18 months, but for a brand new service with a brand new contract, 3 years is like pretty standard. But yes, there you can build in mechanisms that if you need it to be 2, that's doable.
Thank you. Yes.
Are you done? All right. Director Gleason.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak a little bit to Director Riffle's questions about the committee. I think the committee feedback came through really well in the report, so I appreciate that. And I think one of the main things that we talked about was really, if we do this, let's set it up for success. And again, I think that comes through in the level of service approach as well as the marketing. So just want to reiterate that. I'm wondering, in all of this, I also appreciate the visitation information was in there, but do we have any concept of what the yearly ridership might be when this is sort of fully up to speed? In terms of maybe how many round trips per year?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask again, Pete or Sam, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, in terms of ridership, it's really a difficult thing to predict in terms of a crystal ball. It was a little bit, excuse me, sorry, keep having to clear my throat tonight. It was a little bit easier because if we pair this with a parking prohibition, which is again kind of the intent of the shuttle, again, that's one of the things that makes this shuttle work, is it's people's, at those peak times, it'll be people's only option to get to that trailhead. And so, it's, again, difficult to predict ridership, but we can generally assume that, anyone who comes to access the Verity lot, anyone who comes now, who still would like to come, would be using that shuttle. We've seen pretty steady growth in the numbers over the years. And of course, there's growth in the region, so we can assume kind of a steady growth from there. So, I would need to, I'm sorry, I don't have the report in front of me right now, but I can pull it up in terms of actual ridership numbers that we have in there. I would just caution you to note that it's very difficult to predict, but that the fact that this will be a required way to get to this trailhead is kind of a way to ensure that you have ridership that's pretty consistent with your overall visitation numbers, I guess is what we're getting at.
Okay, thanks. And I think we saw in the public feedback that there might be some people who opt out. Some people, I think, said probably I won't take a shuttle under any circumstance, even if it's high quality of service. And then also, I think I mentioned in the PNR meeting that I know people who actually don't go there because they are concerned they're not going to get a parking spot. Mm-hmm. Do we have any sense of how those numbers trade off? Like, is that unmet demand a lot more than maybe the people who would opt out of it?
I'll just jump in, Tyler. I don't think that's something that we can predict. I don't know if we've looked super deeply into the survey results and the cross tabs to kind of evaluate that, but that's something that's really hard. Those kind of user choice surveys where we ask about a hypothetical service that doesn't exist, that data is very speculative at best. But I think what you did is you just highlighted kind of those two different things pull it in a different direction. Some folks say, I would never go if there's a shuttle. Some folks say I would only go if there's a shuttle because I can't get there otherwise. And so I think what what we hope is that those two things maybe kind of offset each other. Sam, I saw, did you have anything to add? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I saw you went off mute.
Yeah, and a couple pieces there. I think this is, this highlights the importance of really good data tracking when this gets up and running as people figure out what the service is. And there will be, it's hard to predict or project that exact trade-off. No, I don't have anything real to add. I thought I did, but I think you said it. Oh, I know what it was. One last thing was, looking at visitation by hour, there are peaked times, and then there are, as you know, times that are less crowded. And so those were the times where we suggested putting 2 buses on the route so that people would minimize waiting. But for a lot of those other time periods, the ridership projections are still lower than the capacity or the seats that a bus would have available. So there's still wiggle room for growth without any additional investment. So it's a little bit hard to make projections for a service like this, but coming at it from the supply side can sometimes help.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, so the visitorship numbers, I guess, are in your report, right? It's between 50 and 214 visitors per day at the trailhead right now. But you're right, part of it is constrained by the parking. So that's one. And then I forget how many parking spaces at Verde?
So the conceptual plans include about 110 parking spaces.
110,
Mhm.
yeah, okay. And yeah, I would count myself in the group that definitely avoids it on weekends, because I know it's just so overcrowded. And and we know how beautiful Prisma Creek redwoods are. So it is true. It's hard to project from the current visitorship numbers, which are, or even the size of the parking lot, right? So but yes, if you just look at the visitorship numbers, you do have to ask yourself, the investment that we need is very high. I guess one question is, so what is the prospect for the autonomous vehicles? Because I know some agencies are beginning to experiment with them.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting that question. It's a great question, but Sam.
I can
Sam,
speak to that for sure. And I wanted to know, one other thing that we have kind of going in our favor for this is, especially since COVID, since the visitation rates have gone up at a lot of resource areas, especially at the bigger national parks, not so much at some of the regional places like this, but a shuttle and some of the parking programs that we're going to talk about next, those things have really become, I don't want to say standard, but much more common than they ever have been. And I think a lot of folks, certainly not all of the users, but many folks are more used to using shuttles and things like that to access popular areas than they ever have been. So that is one thing that we have kind of going in our favor. For autonomous vehicles, in terms of running a shuttle like this, it's not really there yet in terms of running it on this type of road with the parking turnaround required and the ADA boarding and all that stuff. It really is, the market's not even really close, I would say, to be fully realistic. If that does become something real, again, a contractor would be at the forefront of that, especially if there was some sort of a cost savings that would come with that. A contractor would be one of the first ones to do that for sure. So that's another reason to kind of go with that. But I would say that's probably not on the horizon anytime soon.
I did read about maybe Riverside coming out with some kind of a pilot program. So, but I would think it would have a huge impact on our operating costs, obviously. And then just to help me with the timeline, When, can you remind me when we were gonna open the Verde parking lot and the trailhead?
Yeah, the Verde Road parking lot and trailhead, right now, tentatively, 2028.
So a little time for the autonomous vehicles.
Potentially.
Could
Yeah.
be. And you know, like I said, the shuttle operators, that's what they specialize in. They're usually at the forefront of that, whether it's a legal requirement to move to zero emission, or if there's a market advantage to having those, you know, any sort of technology, they're going to be the ones who are willing to adopt that because of the business opportunity. So that's another reason to kind of let them deal with that, and then you know, work that into our contracts with them.
Okay, quick
Thank you.
follow-up to the time. Thank you for the timing question. So in 2028, when this opens, what options then would a visitor have in order to get to that trailhead? So they could ride the shuttle, they could park at Verde and ride their bike. I forget, is there a trail that's going to be, I forget how close the trail would be, or is that going to be a long way around?
Yeah. So you're asking about what trails are going to be right there at the Verde parking area?
Well, I'm asking what options people will have other than the shuttle.
For sure. Yeah. So if folks want to park at Verde or get to Verde, however else they are, and they don't want to go to, say, the Prisma Creek trailhead, there is a, I think, 1.5 mile loop trail that's there. That does have really great coastal views.
Right.
And then there is a through trail that will connect to the existing trail network. That is a much longer trail. Again, you're hiking through the grasslands and you've got those great coastal views. Those, we envision that's for the folks that maybe are going for a much longer hike or say bike
So
ride.
that would be a long hike then,
Yeah.
from Verde to the trailhead. It's 4 miles. Oh, okay.
Sorry, what? Yes, but I thought you were. I apologize. I thought you were asking about the.
No, I was just what other options people would have.
Yeah, so they either can hike the new trails at Prisma of the Sea trails, or they can go to the across to Cal Prisma, so the coastal trail over there. Otherwise, the other option is taking the shuttle and going to Prisma Creek trailhead.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Were we going to move on to something else now?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Thank you for those great questions. Moving on to parking management concepts. So in terms of the parking management concepts, we wanted to consider them at areas where they'd be the most effective, where there's the highest need and demand, and where the benefit to cost will be the highest. And so the concepts are most effective in larger parking areas with formalized parking stalls. So they're recommended for both the improved Verde Road and Northridge parking areas. And the concepts that we looked at were real-time parking information, reservation parking, and carpool parking. And so once the parking area is open to the public, we'd like to include real-time parking information. But in terms of the reservation parking and carpool parking, Parametric finds that the parking capacity improvements that the district's going to be doing at the future and new Verde Road parking area and then the existing Northridge parking area, that they should address the parking and congestion issues in the near to medium term. So at this time, reservation parking and carpool parking isn't not recommended for initial implementation at those parking areas. So the question is, when would we implement these strategies? So Parametrics identified that once parking demand regularly exceeds 80% of parking capacity during peak periods, that's when it's recommended to implement reservation parking and or carpool parking at those parking areas. And that is a transportation industry standard. And just as an example, San Mateo County is using an 85% metric in their Get There Together TDM plan. And so some indicators of this include reduced visitor experience, whether that's observed or reported, increased parking congestion, parking queues overflowing onto Verde Road, infrequent parking turnover, reducing parking supply, resulting in excess vehicle circulation, or just visitors leaving the preserve before they can actually find a parking spot. I am now going to pass this along to Jen, who's going to get into a little bit more details on the strategies.
Great, thank you, Tyler. So we will start off the three parking management concepts by looking at real-time parking information. And this is a really helpful tool that uses sensors to track the number of available parking spaces in a parking area. And this information can then be relayed to visitors through apps or online to give them more trip planning information and to help them more easily find available parking spaces. And this has been implemented really successfully at Rancho already. So the way this works is that there are sensors set up at the entrance and exit of a parking area. You can have sensors at individual stalls, but this would obviously cost more money to implement. And vehicles are tracked when they enter or exit the parking area, and then this information can be made available on websites, on apps, or through signs. And this really helps to give visitors information before they leave their homes. And over time, online trends can be sort of tracked to further assist in decision making. So these images here show some examples of how real-time parking information is deployed, particularly at Rancho. You can see there is an image of a sign showing digital number of spaces. This is actually not recommended for Purissima, given that the individual trailheads are very unique. When someone sets out to go to Purissima, they typically have a trail in mind that they want to hike. They have a trailhead in mind that they want to go to, and so they're less likely to be willing to change course if they do see a sign saying that parking is limited. They might just go anyways and then try their luck. However, making information available online can provide really helpful information for visitors to make sort of go, no-go decisions, and particularly if they are coming from closer communities. If they see that parking is really scarce or if parking is not available, they could pivot to maybe go to a different preserve. Next up, we have parking reservations, and this is a really popular parking management strategy that provides an improved visitor experience while it also facilitates management of the flow of vehicles into different facilities. So the way this works is that reservations are typically made through an online website. So for our potential operating scenarios, reservations could be required during peak periods with a certain percentage of spaces in the lot designated for reservations. Of course, this could be adaptable based on usage and on the ground implementation. People would reserve typically online. However, this could also be done as sort of a walk-up or a day of using apps, using a telephone number or on-site kiosks for people who may not have smartphones or may not be as technologically savvy. This would sort of link reservations to license plate numbers. So in terms of enforcement, it would require staff to monitor about every 2 to 4 hours to go through and scan license plates to make sure that the vehicles that are parked do have those reservations. And typically the way that parking reservation systems work is that visitors will pay a small nominal fee to sort of give them skin in the game, if you will. So to make sure that they're less likely to reserve a space and then not show up and therefore take away demand from people who would otherwise use it. There have been examples, for example, the Heavenly Ski Resort has had success with free reservations for its carpooling and its ADA spaces. So this is something that could perhaps be explored if we were to go that route. And this slide shows some images about the sort of user interface for these parking reservation systems. We have apps, we have, in some cases, QR codes that could be scanned on site or websites where people could reserve their parking spaces in advance. And as I've said before, there are other methods available to help people make on-site or day of reservations, for example, phone numbers or kiosks. And then lastly, we have carpool and van pool parking. And designating parking stalls for carpools, van pools, or really just high occupancy vehicles of any type is a best practice in parking management. And this is sort of similar to high occupancy lanes on freeways in that it encourages people to make trips in larger groups, thereby reducing the total number of cars that would potentially be traveling to the preserve. Typically, carpool areas are designated with striping and signage. And a certain number or a certain percentage of spaces would initially be allocated. And again, because this is demarcated using striping and signage, it would be easy to adjust based on data or feedback to make a higher percentage or a lower percentage of spaces available for that carpool and van pool parking. This would require the entries of the parking areas to be staffed. Someone would need to make sure that if it's a 3+ person carpool area, someone would have to verify that there are actually the correct number of people in those vehicles. And this could also be paired with an online reservation system. So for example, when people are making reservations, they could reserve specifically for a carpool or van pool spot at the time of their making reservations. And then the next slide, again, just shows some of the user interface or how this would or could be implemented on the ground. So on the left here, we see a reservation site that includes the option to do carpool and van pool parking. And then we see those signs and those stripings that would demarcate the spaces or the carpool specific areas. So now I will pass it back over to Tyler to talk about the cost for these concepts.
Thank you, Jen. So all these concepts would require initial capital investments and some staff time. And in terms of the operating costs here, this is just based on a 1-year basis. And so for reservation and carpool parking, there are different scenarios that trade off between higher capital and staff operating costs. For example, using technology to ensure monitoring and compliance instead of staff time, as described in Parametrics report. And for a breakdown of the staff time as a slice of that operating costs, just refer to page 10 of the board report. So with that, board questions for this topic. Before getting into the next steps.
I don't think that was pretty clear yet.
Okay, I'm going to move on to next steps. Whoops. Yeah. So following board acceptance of the proposed shuttle and parking management concept options as the CEQA project description to initiate environmental review, staff would proceed with the following steps. So return to the board at a later date for consideration of CEQA certification and project approval, which is anticipated in late 2025. Identify capital improvements that may be necessary for support of the shuttle program and also looking into any potential parking restrictions. Engage vendors to understand vehicle options that meet the district's needs and develop a scope of services and monitoring framework. Foster relationships with key stakeholders to support potential future shuttle phases. Continue researching funding opportunities. Explore integrating interpretive programming with the shuttle program. And continue communication with the adjacent neighbors to address concerns and remedies. So that brings us to the general manager's recommendation again. And with that, I don't know if it's time for public comment.
Yeah. Do we have any public comment?
President McNiven, I don't know.
None? I wasn't sure if this was a question or a comment, so I sort of saved it for a bit. If we do this CEQA that you've recommended, what would happen if we were to expand on the highly likely chance it'll be successful because people are getting used to shuttles? It seems to me that preserve really needs a shuttle to go around the outside
Mhm.
from the top parking lot to the, what do you call that? The Gulch parking.
Crabtown Gulch.
Crabtown Gulch down to Verde. I mean, it's nice that we're doing 4 miles,
Mhm.
but you're pretty limited in the trails that you can do from. I know we're trying to eliminate parking at the Purisima Creek trailhead. And I think this is a great way to start. But there's other trails in that preserve that people would like to do that are 8 miles long.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if the CEQA that you're going to present would cover a little bit of expansion in the program down the line.
Yeah, the CEQA is certainly going to consider the core concept, but also the potential possibility for expanded shuttle service. So the concept 2 was looking at expanded options. And while we didn't include it in this report, in the 2022 study, there was recommendations for like a preserve wide shuttle system. So any potential future shuttle options could be wrapped up into that CEQA process.
Might not be a bad idea, but it means a lot of work and a lot of delay, but it was just a suggestion I was throwing out.
Thank you. Oh, and Gretchen's gonna speak to that.
Jump in if I. Gretchen Austin, Senior Planner. And just to clarify, at this point, we're looking kind of at this core concept 1, and we can also certainly discuss, as we have now, that idea of that expanded shuttle on the coast side within this CEQA process. However, I just want to caution that really we're looking at this coastal shuttle service first to determine really if it is viable. And that future expansion would definitely occur at a future phase when we have spent this time, multiple years really getting this pilot program off the ground, seeing if it works. So really that would be a future project in a future phase, and that environmental review would occur at that time.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Well, my family, they go to the North Ridge parking and then they have us drive all the way down the hill because they can't be driving back again. And that's fine. It's a great outing, but I think people might want to use a little bit more of the preserve ultimately, but let's start small. Yeah, good idea.
You've got it, yeah.
Okay, is there any more deliberation? Go on. Yeah.
I'll move the general manager's recommendation.
I'll second.
You decide.
I'm gonna go with Mr. Seer. Director Gleason,
Yes.
Director Christine Tucker,
Yes.
Director Riffle,
Yes.
President McNiven.
Yes.
Director Holman.
Yes, and just one quick comment. I agree with Director Gleason's comment earlier that the staff report did capture the numerous questions and comments from the PNR committee. The one thing that didn't come up tonight was something I bring up periodically, which is that we still don't know what the capability is of any of the preserves in order to absorb how many people. And that's still, I just want to make sure that stays on the radar. So I'll support this, but that is a caveat that I really want to carry throughout all of our projects that allowing access. Thanks.
Director Kishimoto.
Yes.
Director Seer.
Yes, and just thank you, Stephanie, for fantastically thorough job. Detail and significant number of pages. But it seemed to cover all the bases. And I hope that we can have a successful program.
Thank you. Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Board Business Item 12 is approval of the rangeland management plans for multiple grazing units. Johnson Ranch Grazing Unit in Miramontes Ridge Open Space Preserve, Cloverdale Ranch and Butano Farms Grazing Units in Cloverdale Ranch Open Space Preserve, and the South Cowell Addendum to the Elkis Labitas Grazing Unit in Purisima Creek Redwoods Open Space Preserve.
Just take a moment to set the presentation up.
Matthew, did you bring any cows with you? You're kind of,
Not this evening.
okay.
Is this gonna work? Mhm.
Well, good evening. I'll repeat my introduction for the microphone's sake. Matthew Shapiro, Conservation Grazing Program Manager. We prepared a not very long presentation for you this evening, but given the late hour and the already long evening, I'll make the presentation even shorter, run through the slides, and I'm happy to take questions through the presentation if you have any. Hopefully the board report provided the necessary detail to allow you to feel comfortable discussing and deliberating this item. I'll start with the general manager's recommendation as we do. There's two elements. One, to adopt the rangeland management plans for the Johnston Ranch Grazing Unit, Cloverdale Ranch and Butano Farms Grazing Units, and the South Cowell Addendum to the Elkis Labitas Grazing Unit. And two, to amend the Johnston Ranch Uplands Preliminary Use and Management Plan, the Cloverdale Ranch Preliminary Use and Management Plan, and the South Cowell Property Preliminary Use and Management Plan to reflect the adoption of the rangeland management plans. For our presentation, we have three elements. I'm going to talk broadly and review kind of what rangeland management plans are and how they function as planning documents. Going to provide some brief but specific highlights from these three RMPs in particular, and then talk a little bit about what the next steps will be should the general manager's recommendations be adopted. So rangeland management plans are planning documents. Their purpose is to provide a framework for us as resource managers, land managers, and to our grazing tenants to help them make decisions both daily, monthly, seasonally, annually, and for us to be in conversation with our grazing tenants. Rangeland management plans have a number of elements, but broadly speaking, they sort of always start with an articulation of goals and objectives that are specific to any one property. There's an analysis of the existing resources and infrastructure on the property, and that includes soil, vegetation, water, wildlife, and rangeland condition. There's a property-specific analysis of the agricultural capacity of the property, and in the case of grazing, that typically looks at the number of head of cattle that a property can support, the appropriate seasons and stocking and management of the pastures themselves. And then there's a series of recommendations about how to manage those livestock in the context of the natural resources, what some best management practices are, and then recommendations for improvements and maintenance, mostly of the built physical infrastructure. And then lastly, a discussion of recommendations of monitoring, long-term monitoring of our activities on the land. You know, simply put, what these plans do is help us address livestock management in the context of natural resource goals and objectives, which of course is core and central to our mission here at the district. The plans are navigating a difficult task, which is both to be specific enough to be useful and actionable, but also broad enough to be flexible and adaptable across time. Typically, these plans are authored to persist for 10 or so years with the idea that they'll be renewed. So there's sort of a long arc in terms of the applicability that these plans need to have. And sort of cutting to that idea of at least having some specificity to it, what these plans also help us do as district staff is develop our ongoing annual work plans here at the district. And so what you'll see, should these plans be adopted, is in the next couple of years that specific recommendations from these RMPs will come before you, the board, as items, contracts, and actions that we'll be taking and will be guided by this planning document. And then lastly, I'll just emphasize that the board kind of baked these rangeland management plans into the agricultural policy that you recently adopted. And so they are necessary elements for us to be able to manage any one of these, all of these properties, but then specific rangeland management plans specific to each property. I'll transition to some general highlights. There's similarities across the properties, but there are unique characteristics of each. I'll start with Johnston Ranch in the Miramontes Open Space Preserve. Johnston Ranch has fairly limited infrastructure generally. It's mostly just one big pasture, so a lot of what the RMP is discussing is recommendations for expanded grazing infrastructure to allow us to have more precise management. It's a moderately sized property amongst our holdings, 415 grazable acres, which supports 31 cows, although currently the current operator is running the property seasonally, so there are more cows for fewer months in the year. One thing that's not addressed in the RMP specifically, since it is a few years old, is the forthcoming agricultural and habitat pond project, which I believe the board heard about as an informational item recently. But what I will say is that happily, many of the recommendations in the RMP around improved infrastructure will support the pond infrastructure as it's built and will limit the amount of conflict and will increase compatibility between the cattle and the pond infrastructure. Turning to Cloverdale Ranch. Cloverdale Ranch, there's 2 grazing units that are contained in the Cloverdale Ranch rangeland management plan. That's what we call Cloverdale Ranch, which is the larger of the 2 units, and then Butano Farms, and you can see the grazable acres and the number of cows that each property holds. Both are in and have adequate infrastructure to support the existing cattle operations, but there are specific recommendations about how that can be improved. In particular, there's some limitations when it comes to stock water in terms of supporting more widely dispersed use of the property from the cattle. So that would be something that we would work on in forthcoming years. As a very coastal property, we have really extensive extensive brush encroachment in the grassland areas as a coastal property. And so there's a discussion of how to be more aggressive in our management of that brush. And then, of course, what's so special about Cloverdale Ranch are our special status wildlife species, in particular San Francisco garter snake. So that plan has specific attention and considerations for how we manage for and around that particular species. And then lastly, the South Cowell addendum to Elchis labitus, and this is relevant with the presentation that we just heard. This is a property that is now part of the larger Elchis labitus grazing unit. We'll shortly, with this coming year, begin calling it just the labitus grazing unit generally, but this is a property through which the Persimmon of the Sea Trail will be intersecting. You can see it's it's one of our smaller properties, although in the context adding to Elchis labitus, it provides a nice grazing operation. And because it's an addendum, there's not many recommendations specific to infrastructure. It sort of has what it needs. But I think one of the things that's not addressed in the RMP is the forthcoming Persimmon of the Sea public access trail. And so we will probably need to consider expanded infrastructure to be able to accommodate the access trail when it's built and when the public is able to enjoy it. I'll turn now to next steps, and I think what we want to sort of emphasize and communicate is what the board worked on over the last 18 months, which is really codifying our policy around how we treat these agricultural properties and how rangeland management plans fit into that. And so should these plans be adopted this evening, what that means, is that it will allow us to put these properties up for a request for proposal process, as is described in AG-5.b. And what that process looks like is it's around the corner and sooner than we realize. Next month, we anticipate issuing the 2025 request for proposals for new grazing tenants for a series of properties, of grazing properties that the district has. And these would be 3 of the total of 5 properties that would be up for RFP. We'll release that in January. Proposals will be due in April. Those recommendations will come to the board in May of 2025, with new leases commencing on these properties November 1st of next year. This is a timeline that's very similar to the timeline we had last year, with the one exception being that we're releasing the RFP call earlier to give grazing tenants a longer opportunity to develop their proposals. And then lastly, of course, and I think this maybe goes without saying, we'll take action on the elements that are included in the rangeland management plans themselves. I mentioned in particular some of the infrastructure improvements that will allow for sort of more thoughtful and more precise grazing management. So I'll finish with the slide for the general manager's recommendation. Again, item 1, to adopt the rangeland management plans for these grazing units, and 2, to amend the preliminary use and management plans for the associated open space preserves. And I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Director Kirsten Tucker.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Exciting to be moving forward with this so speedily and efficiently. A couple questions. The rangeland management plans are supposed to be, in place perhaps for 10 years, but I'm thinking as we bring new new grazing tenants on, how do you work? Do you work with them, as time goes on, if they're like, gosh, we think there's more capacity here for, 10 more cows per year or whatever. Is that something that there is enough flexibility in these plans that you can move forward with that, or do they have to be amended, or how does that work?
Yeah, good question. And you sort of struck at it. I mean, I think that there is enough built into these plans as they're written. There is enough flexibility and adaptability to make some of those year-to-year decisions about, given the variability that we experience climatically and ecologically. And so, the numbers that I so often cite in these presentations in terms of cows or sort of carrying capacity of these ranches, those are guides, but they're not hard and fast rules. And so, with the discretion of district staff and our expertise, we are allowed, according to the plan, to make exceptions on years of exceptional forage production, or oppositely on years where there's exceptionally low forage production. And so I think we do have that flexibility. With that said, I can imagine in the next 5 to 10 years, a not insignificant staff effort to begin to update not only these plans, but some of the plans that are older than 10 years. So that's certainly on our horizon for work that needs to happen. But again, sort of striking that balance between being relevant and specific, but also having the breadth to be able to be flexible.
Okay, good. And then building on that, I noticed that each of these rangeland management plans have a specific element addressing additional livestock, equine, poultry capacity, et cetera. I know with some of our existing leases, we actually have some other animals on site. How, moving forward, do you plan to handle that? And whether people need to have permission to do that first, or do we deal with it after the fact? I mean, I'm kind of curious proactively moving forward how we're going to handle that particular aspect.
My understanding of the way that the the supporting documentation is in the conservation grazing program that the primary focus has always been on cattle as the species that we use to accomplish our conservation grazing goals. I think that there's an interesting opportunity in coming years and in coming RMPs to consider other ruminant species like sheep or goats. Equine species are kind of a special category. I think that they're conceived of only as supportive of cattle operations. And so when allowed, which is not on all of our properties, it's only in very small numbers and only appropriate for the level of use according to the size of the operation. And then in regards to other kind of agricultural livestock species, my understanding, and I would invite others to speak, is that it's really not sort of within the core mission of the conservation grazing program to include those species. But in the case of the one property where there are other species at Toto Ranch, there's going to be a separate planning effort which will address an agricultural production zone, which is sort of separate and distinct from the conservation grazing program.
Yeah, that's helpful. I guess the other piece that I was kind of missing here was whether goats or anything like that is something that we would consider as part of the rangeland management plan for these properties, or whether that's outside of the conservation grazing realm.
Looks like Cody Fuentes Winter would like to say something.
All right.
Good evening, Cody Fuentes Winter, Senior Resource Management Specialist. Excellent question. In our policies, there's nothing that excludes other animals from being in the conservation grazing program. It's just that as a whole on the coast side, that is the animal of choice for many of our tenants to bring. We have had other animals that have come onto our property to meet some of our conservation goals, but that's always the mission is to meet conservation goals, and the different animals are used as a tool to meet those goals. So there is nothing that excludes any animals from our conservation grazing. It's just those are the animals of choice that are brought to us by our tenants.
I think, thank you, that's helpful. I guess the question is whether the rangeland management plans include that, or does it get put in the rangeland management plan, or is that just a separate? Where does it go if we do goats?
Yeah, so I mean, one way that we can think about it is that the rangeland management plans, and I think we've talked about this before, utilize this concept of animal units. And that is kind of, we can crosswalk between species when it comes to animal units. And so, for example, like 5 to 7 sheep or goats equals 1 animal unit. And so if we were to encounter a situation where there was an opportunity to introduce a different species, we could begin to think about we could sort of fit that species into the existing RMP. I will say that most of the language in the RMPs for consideration this evening sort of consider mostly cattle as the species of choice. But I will, and I think Cody sort of began to allude to this, I've already gotten inquiries as sheep and goat operations are sort of having a renaissance about whether the district would consider leasing to a sheep or goat operator. And so perhaps that's a conversation we can have in the coming years.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I'm thinking about vegetation management, fuel reduction, things of that sort. So.
And something that Brandon Stewart, Land and Facilities Department Head, wanted me to mention is this coming year, we plan to expand even further our efforts using sheep and goats as a vegetation management tool, not specifically on properties that are earmarked as conservation grazing properties, but on some of our, they could be, but many of the suggestions for areas where they would be grazing are outside of the conservation grazing areas. And so that's sort of a separate but parallel effort that we're spearheading as well.
Okay.
Cody.
Just one more comment about that, and that is in regards to our fire program, in which there's a specific section in the fire program that calls out prescribed herbivory, speaking exactly to what you're getting at with using goats and sheep to reduce fuel loads in certain areas. So we did that last year in Windy Hill, where we used goats. We used goats to graze for the fire program. So that's allowed and encouraged under our fire program.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
just to strike this point, Brandon Stewart, Land and Facilities Manager. So the information that we're gathering as we're incorporating goats and sheep as a means to help us manage our vegetation to support our wildland fire resiliency program, we're gaining additional knowledge, which may be applied to the conservation grazing in the program in the future. So it's kind of a gateway into using these different animals, which could have other applications in other areas of our work.
Thank you. Thank you for this update and report, Matthew. Director Kirsten Tucker just asked 3 of my 4 questions. So my 4th question is, I was a little confused. Is the South Cowell going to stay as a separate, or is that going to be combined into the Libidos, Elkis Libidos, for purposes of the RFP coming up?
The second, so it will be combined. It
Okay.
has been operated. The operator has been combined previously, and it will continue to be combined. And so the 3 units together will be referred to as the Libidos grazing unit.
Okay, but this RFP is just for that, is the South Cowell?
No, this RFP will include all 3 units.
But the resource management plan that
forgive me.
is just for South Cowell, but for purposes of the RFP, they're all going to be combined. Is that?
Technically, this RMP, Rangeland Management Plan, is an addendum to, so it's a South Cowell addendum to the Elkis Libido Rangeland Management Plan.
I got it.
So it is now actually one RMP as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. And then, sorry, just kind of a little bit of a addition to what Director Kirsten Tucker asked. So roughly 10-year life to an RMP. How do we know when, oops, you know what, we need to update this before 10 years? Or, how are we doing kind of year to year? Matthew, what are the metrics we use, I guess, that, yep, this rangeland management plan is actually working?
It's a good question. My tenure here hasn't been so long that I can speak with much experience to
Or
that.
what should it be?
Right.
Maybe.
I think the language in the plan is it should be updated every 10 years or sooner should there be a significant change in the property. Either, for example, I'm sort of, imagining scenarios where a neighboring property, like South Cowell actually, though a neighboring property is acquired and added to a grazing unit, and that would be an opportunity, an appropriate opportunity to revisit the way that the property is managed as a whole.
Okay.
If there's a significant change in the use of the property, with public access would be a good example, to sort of reimagine. Again, I mean, these plans are broad enough that sort of built in and knowing that public access is a priority of the districts. It's kind of built in already. But again, the language is every 10 years, or if there's a significant change sooner than that.
Great. And then my sense is, though, that part of your job then is to discern when this isn't working, right?
Right.
And that's the beauty of having you on.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm very supportive of this. Thanks.
Any more? I think you covered it well, Director Kirsten Tucker. Thank you. Well,
Public comment?
do you have another comment? Oh, public comment.
We do not have any.
Really? Any more deliberation before we?
Oh, just a question along those lines. So Farm Bureau did not comment on this, or they had a chance to review, right?
Farm Bureau were sent the plans and by email on November 1st, and we did not get comment from Farm Bureau.
Interesting. Okay.
I sent it to them too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Be happy to move the general manager's recommendations.
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll take a vote.
Director Gleason?
Yes.
Director Kirsten Tucker?
Yes.
Director Riffle?
Yes.
President McNiven?
Yes.
Director Holman?
I just want to make sure that we're always monitoring how many cows or no, just kidding. Yes.
Director Kishimoto?
Yes.
Director Seer?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Are we going to consider elk?
We can bring back beavers too.
Beavers and elk. Great. Thank you very much, guys. That beavers. All right. Do we have any committee reports this week? Ah,
Oh, gosh, yeah.
that was yesterday.
Yeah.
We just met yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I guess since I chair, we had a good follow-up discussion. So thank you, board, for moving this to committee for the kind of further consideration of the compensation philosophy discussion that we had September, I think it was, when we talked about it. Was it September? Yeah, yeah. So overall, I think the committee had a good opportunity to ask additional questions. I think we all felt pretty good about what was presented to us and will be presented to you in January, I believe. So I'll ask Craig or Karen if you have any other comments. No? Yeah. Great. So yeah, thanks to staff for great work on that, Stefan, and so on. Okay.
Thank you. Staff, do you have anything you'd like to report out?
Good evening, Brian Malone, Assistant General Manager. Just want to give a brief update on our work with Bear Creek Stables. Of course, the board gave us the decision on how to move forward. And almost like right after Thanksgiving, Friends of Bear Creek Stables emailed Anna to initiate the discussion. We've responded. I actually talked to Rick Parfait this afternoon. We set up a meeting to really get started in January. And then we're been concentrating right now on just figuring out the operation until we can reach an agreement with the nonprofit. And we've come to a verbal agreement, which is some final signatures for be definitive, but likely Chaparral will cease operations in early January. And then we will either take over operations ourselves or hire someone to perform just the cleaning and feeding operation. So we're in place to have a smooth transition, although we still have to put some of that in place of us, the district, taking on operations. And we'll report back to the district. But we're glad to have a kind of agreement to end the operation with Chaparral. And then once we have that in place, we'll move forward kind of just with the guidelines to bring back to the board in March for what operator agreement would look like. And that'll be in conjunction with discussions with the Friends. Yeah.
Thank you. Are you taking questions or not?
I will, of course, take this.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
We'll start with Director.
As Joseph Smithian would say, the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
I said, as Joe Smithian would say, the right answer to that is yes.
Yeah. Just a quick question, Brian, is I had received some questions from some of the members of the working group that I led. And I think at the time we thought maybe we should do an FAQ just so that everybody's up to speed. I was just wondering what.
Yeah, and Susanna has drafted that. I actually just reviewed the draft while we were at the board meeting. We did want to try to get a little bit closer to having an agreement with Chaparral, but I think we're certain enough at this point that we have it and we'll send it out tomorrow, most likely.
Oh, great. Great. Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, and then I also will be a staff representative at the thank you event for the ad hoc at the stables on Sunday. And I think some board members are attending that.
Thank you. And could you say again when Chaparral would cease?
So early January, I believe it'll be, their last day will be January 5th. Like I said, we have to get the signatures on that, but we have come to a verbal agreement on that.
Is a part of the FAQs what's happening with feeding between now and then even? Because I'm
Yeah, we're
hearing
just
that they're not
assuring
feeding.
folks basically what I said is that we will either take over operation as staff or we will hire someone that's capable of doing that.
I'm talking about between now and then.
Oh,
Because I'm hearing
yes.
currently they're not feeding.
So
I'm
we have
hearing
not heard
currently.
any reports and you can, if there's someone we need to contact, that's, you've heard differently, we can follow up on that. But we have not heard any recent reports of missed feedings. But like, if that's the case, they should definitely get in touch with us. You know, Omar would be the primary contact.
Okay, yeah, I have been hearing that and that they ask somebody to feed and move a trailer on or whatever and all kinds of stuff. So,
Yeah, just have people report directly to our staff so we can
Okay.
contact Chaparral and address it.
okay, all right. Glad you'll be there on Sunday. I'm going as well. And we'll be taking a dish myself, so there shouldn't be any issue there.
Yeah, so Rick called me today, maybe before he spoke to you, but just wanted to pass on his appreciation for the letter that you sent. And so he seemed very, very pleased with the way things are going right now.
Good. Okay.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay. And finally, director reports.
I think the only thing I have is we had a Santa Clara County Special Districts Association meeting on the 2nd. That's it.
So I would like to ask for support. Actually, President McNiven and I would like to ask for your support for something that we've been thinking about for a couple of years. And it's naming a trail for Lenny Roberts. And we are very, very lucky to have Mike Williams with us this evening, who has been doing a lot of background work on this. And he's provided us with a couple of maps of potential trails that we're thinking about for Lenny. And we'd like to do this. The reason we're doing this now is we'd like to do it while she's with us and can enjoy the honor. So please, Mike, you're doing a lot of work on this.
Thank you, Director Kirsten Tucker. Good evening and happy holidays. It's nice being here and seeing all of you again. Mike Williams with Real Property on a part-time basis now. As Director Kirsten Tucker mentioned, you have 2 trail maps with pictures of views from those trail areas. One is the Johnston Ranch area at Miramontes Ridge Preserve, and the conceptual trail that we discussed as part of the purchase, and which is also part of an agreement with the city of Half Moon Bay to partnership on in the future. And then the Phase 2 La Honda Trail segments from Harrington Creek to Upper La Honda Preserve. So a couple years ago, when working on the Johnston Ranch purchase, Director Kirsten Tucker did have a great idea to recognize Lenny with a trail potentially at Johnston Ranch for her 50+ years of leadership in protecting open space and farmland in San Mateo County. The 4 of us met right before Thanksgiving, Director Kirsten Tucker, President McNiven, and General Manager Ruiz, to discuss the idea, and it was decided it might be good to add in the Phase 2 trails at La Honda for consideration. And then the next steps were to meet with Lenny, and Director Kirsten Tucker and I spoke with Lenny. And what?
She was in the hospital.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say she was touched by the consideration. And she said her preference would be the Johnston Loop Trail. And Johnston Ranch is a great example of Lenny's vision and tenacity of protecting farm and open space land. Before Post and the district worked on protecting Johnston Ranch, Greenfoot Hills and Lenny Roberts worked to save Johnston Ranch from development. In 1991, Johnston Ranch property was purchased by developers for a luxury home and golf course development. In 1992, those developers put on the ballot Measure D to annex the property into the city of Half Moon Bay for those purposes. Lenny and Green Foothills worked with county residents to oppose Measure D, which was defeated by 84% of the voters of the county, 84%. Lenny also worked closely with John Giusti and originally his father, Aldo. And the Giusti family have farmed that property as lessees since 1947. Lenny also successfully, with Green Foothills, opposed the city of Half Moon Bay proposal a little later in the 90s for a baseball field above where the Coastside Fire is. And so to move forward on something like this, the trail naming effort would need to be added to your project list. And then the process itself would be you would go through a formal process with review by LAFPAC and a recommendation to the board, and then board's approval. Naming a trail at Johnston Ranch would largely be symbolic because there is no trail built, and the trail planning is several years away. Having discussed with planning staff, a trail naming project would require a relatively simple amendment to the naming section of the current preliminary use and management plan for the Miramontes Ridge Preserve to name a future loop trail after Lenny, and then the board would need to approve that amendment. The trail does not have to be built or laid out by staff at this time. And then I also want to mention in some of the reaching out to other partners, Peninsula Open Space Trust and John Giusti and the city of Half Moon Bay are all supportive of naming a trail after Lenny at the Johnston Ranch property. And happy to take any questions.
I think this is a great idea. So what steps do we need to take tonight, or?
So if I have nods, if I have majority nods, then we can go ahead and incorporate this into our capital improvement and action plan that in the priorities list that we will be bringing back to you in March. Yeah. Thank you.
Nice one to add in.
Great idea.
Easy one. Great.
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you so much for
Mike.
being here with us.
And thank
tonight.
all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a good holiday.
Great.
Yeah. One more. I attended the staff party Christmas lunch. It was so fun. We had a good time. Thank you, staff, for doing that. And thank me for getting a ride there. It was great. Thank you. Yes.
I have an update.
You have an update.
Of course. Yeah, two things. First, I had a chance to join that Strother Smith bike ride that I had mentioned before, and it was so cool that his son Scott came up from San Luis Obispo to join the ride. So it was really nice to have everybody there. So really special. The other thing is having a chance to really experience the Bear Creek Stables ad hoc process as being, one of the 3 board members. I would like to propose that we have a chance just to kind of step back and review. So how did that go? And what worked and what didn't? Would we want to use that process again and so on? And I think we've got an opportunity. Is it in January, Anna, that we're having a board?
Yeah, for the board, what do we call it? Training / workshop. That's coming up in February.
In February,
Mhm.
okay. So I would like to propose, and maybe we need nods or not, to maybe as one agenda item for that is to have a discussion about, so how did it go? What did we learn? Would we do it again? What would we do differently, and so on. So, but before we added the agenda, I thought it would be good for us to see if there's support.
That's the retreat, what meeting that we're.
It's coming up. We're looking at a date in, I think we're looking at the 22nd or 27th, Maria. I can't recall completely.
But again, that's the retreat date or?
This is separate from the priorities retreat. This is a separate, it's more like a workshop.
The 25th or 27th.
Yes.
Specific just for this?
No. Let me think if I can go back. It's to discuss a number of items around efficiencies and communications that were brought up back in the fall of I guess it's this year. So we'll be having a discussion around those topics.
Okay, so there'll be further opportunity then to add to that list again.
Yeah, I think there is room on the agenda as we're creating it for this particular discussion item if I have a majority interest. And I'm seeing nods, okay.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Sounds
you.
good.
Okay. Well,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Okay, let's see, I did go to the special districts meeting with Craig as a representative of LAFCO. Then I was also attended the LAFCO meeting where we adopted some policies, including the out of agency. This is where when you do work outside your borders. And let's see what else. Oh, one big one was the BCDC meeting, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. Yeah, this was a big step forward. We adopted the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan. It's called RSAP. So by 10 years, by 2034, all cities and counties which kind of touch the bay will have to submit a plan about how they're going to adopt to, 1 more foot of bay sea level rise by 2050 and 3 feet by end of the century. Yeah, it's a big deal. And finally, yeah, I should mention that, let's see, yeah, Kurt and I just attended an informal meeting of Friends of Stevens Creek. They're just exploring ideas about potentially doing a summit, but this would be like about 1.5 years in the future, so. What is that? Oh, potentially a summit, a state of the Stevens Creek from headwaters to the bay. It would be, and the concept would be to study study it as a biodiversity corridor and also a corridor for people walking and biking along it. So it should be very interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Director Seer, do you have anything that you'd like to report?
Nothing exciting. I'm looking at attending the celebration of Garnetta, rather. The Open Space Authority. They're having a celebration where they're including her, similar to what we did with tonight. Been honoring him. And I've known and worked with her long time. She's very instrumental in establishing the authority and then working with the various communities to help move. I thought there are other things I'm doing that day, but I'm planning on sneaking away and getting to South County in time to. It's the first thing on the agenda, so it's at 6:30.
Okay.
Okay.
Wally.
All right. Well, I would like to adjourn this meeting in honor of District Volunteers Strether and Thomasina Smith. And get ready. It is 9:50, 9:49. Thank you. Thanks so much.